Why don't we keep all the jobs in Fairfax? By Fairfax, first, foremost, and always. You might say, well, okay, we're building a wall around Fairfax and we have to survive inside of Fairfax and nothing comes. You say, well, but no food is grown in Fairfax. That comes from the rest of Virginia. Maybe the farmers grow food. We don't have any coal in Fairfax. That comes from the western part of Virginia. That's what powers our lights. Now the power goes off, there's no food, there's no gasoline, no nothing, right? But that's good, because you got a lot of work to do. Are you with me? You got a lot of jobs to do. Your standard of living's doing what? Collapsing to nothing. But hey, that's good, so why don't we do this? We'll quarantine you to your block. And we put a wall around your block and say, only trade with people on your block. You can't trade with the rest of Fairfax. You say, oh shit, my dentist doesn't live on my street. Well, you have to do your own root canal. We don't want you to lose that job, so you got to learn to do your own. Yeah, you need an appendectomy, cut on yourself. Yeah, but it's the hospitals. No, I know, but you got to learn to do this yourself. You want to keep the jobs at home. Start operating on yourself. Now your standard of living's going what? Straight to nothing? But that's good, because you got a lot of work to do. And if that's good, we'll build a wall around you and quarantine you from the rest of the world where nothing gets into you. And then you face Mother Nature. Smiling Mother Nature with economic isolation grinning at you, saying, welcome to death. See, if I told you I was going to isolate you from the rest of humanity and build a wall and say survive on your own within that, you can't make a pencil. Let alone do anything else. You die. Mercantilism, write this down, is death. It is death. Because all of the gains in life come from other people. They come from other people. They come from other people's skill, talents, productivity. Other people's comparative advantage is what leads to your standard of living. Are you with me? Give you an example of this, right? When Farmer Jones goes out and does what he does best, what's he do? He does one thing, he grows wheat out in Kansas. He grows food for 500 people that do not have to grow food. Those 500 people can do other things that they're skilled at, right? Become engineers and doctors and all kinds of stuff. Are you with me? Because they don't have to dig dirt. Farmer Jones efficiently digs dirt. Are you with me? Every time you buy a piece of bread, you are benefiting from him growing the wheat, not you. You're benefiting from everybody in that system that brought that loaf of bread to your table. The gains from trade and life don't come from you. They come from other people. It is other people that give us the benefits in life. And guess what they get from us? Their benefits. It's called exchange. In life, you couldn't make a pencil by yourself. Nobody has ever shown how you could. But yet, when you trade with millions of strangers, they get made, don't they? You don't have to spend a lifetime to make a pencil. You get one for what, 15 cents? If I said to you, but then you don't have a job to make a pencil. You'd say, well, that's bullshit. Why would I want to make a pencil? I will buy the damn pencil. By selling what I do best. Right? Bastiat had this amazing way of totally crushing organisms. One last point. Especially in the current context of the news, I won't name names. If another country came and said, we're going to quarantine your country and isolate you, that's usually an act of war, isn't it? Because you know that's going to kill you. But then when politicians in this country say, we need to build a wall around us and quarantine us from those foreign goods, what are they asking? To do the same thing people that are trying to kill you are doing. We don't call that an act of war on the domestic population. I do. I said, let's have the argument right now. Show me where Bastiat's wrong in that reductive absurdity. Got a lot of work to do, not worth doing. You could have been doing stuff else, get gains from all over life. If you deny yourself the gains others have to offer you by their skill, their talent, their productivity, who's the biggest idiot? Yeah, you are. You're isolated. If you want to be isolated, God bless you. Just don't isolate me with you. Don't take me along to death with you. One more point. I got to do one more on Bastiat, because Bastiat's my favorite. He's so good. He's in your face hard. Okay. He was a political exorcist in his day. Bastiat points out that tariffs are not only bad, because they destroy the gains from trade, isolate humanity, and lead to war. All of history proved Bastiat was correct. But he also points out that it's just economically irrational. It's illogical. Tariffs never are logical. They never make sense, and here's why. If you think about this, Bastiat tells us in the 1840s, he said, one of the things every government in the world has done is build infrastructure of some kind. What do we mean by infrastructure? Roads, bridges, ports, docks, things of this nature. Maybe if you're in a mountainous region, you tunnel through the mountain. Why do you do that? Because you want to facilitate trade and commerce. Are you with me? Why do you build roads? So people can move around, goods can move around, trade and commerce. Are you with me? Okay, so notice on the one hand, governments, from the time of the Romans and even before them, to the present, spend zillions of dollars doing what? Building infrastructure to facilitate trade and commerce and prosperity. All right. Let's say you're country A, and there's a mountain range, maybe the Swiss Alps, between you and country B. You got comparative advantages that could offer benefits to B, and B has them that could offer it to you, but there's something standing between you and A and B. It's called Mother Nature. Are you with me? So maybe governments come along and say, let's tunnel through these mountains of the Swiss Alps so we can facilitate commerce and trade, and maybe spend billions of dollars to tunnel through these mountains. We lose hundreds of lives tunneling through mountains, building bridges where people die building bridges and so forth. But why do we do this? To facilitate commerce, investment, prosperity, migration, and so forth. He said, now look at the logic of the mercantilists. They spend billions of dollars to tunnel through this mountain to overcome the natural barrier to our productivity, to our comparative advantage. We lose money and life and so forth because we're making this big investment for the future, better future. Then people use that tunnel to make trade with those foreign people on the other side of the mountain range. Then politicians see a problem. They see trade deficits. And they see jobs being lost. And then they erect artificial political barriers to stop them from using that tunnel. So we invest real resources to knock down nature's barriers only to erect political barriers after we've already knocked down the barriers. Mercantilism is idiocy on steroids. Never had an argument to refute Bastiat. A lot of people need to be reading Bastiat. So it's irrational, it's illogical, stupid, it's completely dumb. Never a good argument for this. Unless your argument is, I like poverty, we want to be poor, and we like war, and destruction and death. Well, if that's it, I can't tell you wrong scientifically, but I can't think it's not morally wrong. And so, now, a few more things before we take our break. When we look at international transactions, they go through money. They go through money. And there's a certain thing that you need to understand about trade through money. It's something called exchange rates. An exchange rate is a price of one money in terms of another money. It is a price of one money in terms, we're saying price there. Why are prices what they are? So we're going to be looking at what is the value of the euro to the peso, or the dollar to the yen, or the yuan to the cruzero, whatever. What sets that ratio, that price? Well, if you think about this, there's really two different theories in economics to explain this price. I'm going to get these up here. The first is called purchasing power of parity doctrine. It's a long-run theory. And it's going to look at relative inflation rates. Now, we haven't dealt with inflation rates, that's more macro. But just bear with me, I'll give you a short theory of macro really quickly. That's a long-run theory. That was first discovered by a Swedish economist in 1900 named Gustav Cassel at the Stockholm School of Economics in Sweden. And he's basically saying, look, what sets an exchange rate deals with the value of the money in your country and the value of the money in the other country. That's going to set that exchange rate. And Cassell's theory was the only theory for about 50, 60 years until this theory comes up. And this is real interest rate parity, which is a short-run theory. And it's going to look at abnormal returns on assets and investments. So one is a value of money model, the other one is a return on investment model. Just as a note, these are not contradictory. You've got to understand this. They're actually complementary. Purchasing power of parity explains probably 95% of what you see on changes of the exchange rate. But there's always that residual that they can't account for. And that's why this one comes up. And this is the investment account model, and that covers the residual. So after we've adjusted for purchasing power of parity, then this one comes in to explain the rest of it. Are you with me? Two theories, both like two different variables in the equation of what set that price. Now, a few more points on this. In your Gortney and Stroop textbook, because they have a discussion of these, they will put both graphs into one. I'm going to separate them. Two separate graphs because I think it's more easier to see two graphs as opposed to one. Let's start with purchasing power parity. Purchasing power, value of money, parity, long run, and its relative inflation rates determine the foreign exchange. This is what Cassell gave us 100 years ago, a little over 120 years ago. Now what the purchasing power parity doctrine states, write this down. Like goods in different countries, should cost the same absent transactions costs. Like goods in different countries should cost the same absent transactions costs. Now let me give you an example. Okay? Let's say we have two countries. I'm going to make it as simple as humanly possible. Different currencies. Let's say you have the USA and we have Japan. Two countries. On the y-axis is the exchange rate of dollars to yen in America and in Japan. Zero is always the point of origin. We're going to have the quantity the foreign exchange on the x-axis. So far, so good. Now let's say we have this. We have a supply of dollars in America, the demand for dollars in America. And let's say the exchange rate is $1 equal 1 yen. Are you with me? I always get a smart ass that says it's 82.4 yen to the dollar. I don't care. Doing logic at this point. Now, okay, so there's a quantity of foreign reserves here. Now let's say we have this. We have a supply of dollars in Japan. People want to buy things from Japan, send dollars over, but they need to get yen. So this would be the demand for dollars in Japan. And there's going to be an equilibrium exchange rate. $1 to 1 yen. Let's start with an equilibrium. So far, so good. Now, let's say we're going to trade goods back and forth and buy them through money. And let's say we're going to trade apples. And let's say one apple you can get in America for $1. And you can get one apple in Japan for 1 yen. Let's just say. Start with an equilibrium. If there are no transactions costs, and apples cost $1 here, you get $1, you get an apple. Or you take $1 here, get a yen, and in Japan, the apple costs a yen, and there's no transactions costs. Would you care where you bought your apples? No, they're the same. Now we're going to introduce a difference. What do differences cost? Movement, dynamic, everything in economics is differences. Watch. Now we're going to change the value of money. It's called inflation. Let's say the Federal Reserve in the United States and chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Jerome Powell, decides to have 100% inflation. Let's say he doubles the quantity of money. You say, how would that happen? Print up a lot of money. That's how you do it. Now, let's say we have this one economic good. We're trading back and forth, apples, back and forth. And money trades only against apples. What's going to happen to the price of apples in America in terms of U.S. dollars? The price of apples is going to double, right? Everyone's got twice as many dollars, the price of apples is double. So here we go. The apple in the United States now costs $2, doesn't it? Let's say the Bank of Japan, the Central Bank of Japan, has no inflation. Still costs 1 yen to get an apple in Japan. Now where are dollars going? Go to Japan, right? The apples are cheaper in Japan. Yeah. See, at the old exchange rate, given this higher inflation rate, dollars are now moving to Japan to buy cheaper apples. So that's going to be an increase in the supply of dollars in Japan relative to yen. What's that going to cause? Well, if you think about this, this is going to cause a surplus of dollars searching for Japanese yen to buy those cheap apples, isn't it? They're going to say, I want yen, I want yen, I want yen. $2 gets me 1 apple. $2 at that exchange rate give me 2 yen, and at $1, at 1 yen per apples, how many apples can I pull out? 2 apples. So the relative price of apples just was cut in half down to U.S. inflation. Now, why do we know this equilibrium exchange rate is going to adjust from this to this? Surplus and push prices down. Okay? And here's why. The guy that sits there with 2 yen and gives you 2 yen for $2 in Japan gave you how much? 2 apples worth of value? When he takes those 2 US dollars back to America and finds out apples cost $2, how many apples did he get? He's going to get 1. Did we just steal an apple from him before the exchange rate adjusts? Foreigners aren't stupid. They're not going to let you steal for very long. So what are they going to ask for? More money. That's exactly right. So now what's going to happen is this. The exchange rate is going to adjust from this equilibrium to this equilibrium. And this is called, in this case, a depreciation of the dollar. Or what's another way of saying this? An appreciation of the yen against the dollar. When will that process of depreciation stop? When like goods in different countries cost the same. So now at that exchange rate, I say, well, I got $2, I can buy 1 apple. If I bring $2 to Japan, I only get a yen, I'm going to only get 1 apple. Aren't the cost of apples the same? Yeah. So what did Cassell give us? Purchasing power parity doctrine, saying inflation affects the value of your money in your country. And that deteriorating value of the money in your country is going to show up in other countries. When they come back with that money, they're going to realize they can't buy as much. They're going to ask for more to offset the loss of person. Are you with me? The great Gustav Cassell nailed this one. Now, so notice it's the differences that cause the movement. What if I said America had 100% inflation, so did Japan? Would anything have changed? No. It's the differences that cause the movement. The movement eliminates the differences in the relative prices. So there's no more movement. Think of this equilibriums or stopping principles. You have a stop, and then something changes, and then movement, and it stops. Are you with me? Now, so what does this suggest? It suggests countries that have high rates of inflation see the value of their currency fall, not only in their own country, but in every country they trade with that has lower rates of inflation. And of course, Cassell's exactly right. That's exactly what you see 100% of the time. Now, or countries that have lower rates of inflation attract money to their country trying to get the currency to buy more goods with it. And it appreciates if you have a lower rate of inflation. That's the first theory. There's a second theory. It's called real interest rate parity. We'll take a break and we'll get through this one. And this is going to look at rates of return on assets and investments. You see, where purchasing power parity is a long-run theory, I mean, think about it. 120 years ago, if you got some foreign money in your hand from a country you've never been to, it's going to take you a while to do what? Go to that country and figure out what you can buy with it. So the long run, 120 years ago, could have been a year, 6 months. It takes time to figure out what can I buy with this currency when I take it back. Now, with technology, can you guess what's happening? The long run is dramatically shrinking. Don't we do inflation reporting of statistics? Virtually every country in the world reports this data monthly. Now it's shorts dramatically. But it's still longer run than this. What is this? This is real interest rate parity. It's a short run. And it's going to capture the difference that cannot be explained by purchasing power. And they're looking at returns on assets and investments. This is the investment model. Now when you think about this, write this down. After you have adjusted for purchasing power, after you have adjusted for purchasing power, that's number one. After you've adjusted for risk, that's number two. You have to make adjustments for what? Value of money and risk. Then you're at what's called real interest rate parity. The real return after you've adjusted for risk. And why is that so important? Because in finance, the more riskier an investment, what's the rate of return have to be? Higher to induce people to invest, so they always move together. Once you've adjusted for risk on investment, once you've adjusted for inflation, you've got this residual, and this explains the residual. It gets all the rest. They're looking at one specific price that's called the interest rate. Where this one is based on the value of money, however you spend it in the whole country, right? Now let's go and do an analysis of this. This is real interest rate parity. USA, we'll do Japan again, make it simple. On the y-axis is the exchange rate, the ratio of dollars to yen, let's say, zeros at 20 million. Supply of dollars and demand for dollars. Supply of dollars in Japan.